On this episode of Insight, what happens to your life when you cheat death?
When I go to the beach with the kids, they hate it that I don't get in with them. Oh, my hair will get wet, or I'm always, thinking of an excuse. But when I get in, I float with my head under, just on the top of the water. I'm terrified of it. But when I actually do get in and I do that, it feels so nice. I have an overwhelming sense of peace and calm come over me. It gives me a feeling that I don't get from anything else. And I can't answer why it does that, considering I'm not really a water person or a swimmer. My relationship to water has changed a lot over my life. When I was a child, I had no fear of water at all. I had no fear of anything really, until I had the accident. And since then, my relationship with water has deteriorated as I've got older. I was analysing how it was going to happen, how I was going to die. I didn't panic at all. Normally I would expect myself to go into survival mode and fight really hard, but I didn't. To this day, I cannot answer why I felt calm and peaceful when I thought I was going to die, because it is not my nature to feel calm and peaceful ever. I think to myself quite often now, how did I survive it? And I want an answer for it, which I don't know if we can get.
Meredith, what happened that day?
We decided to go camping in the wet season in far north Queensland, which I'm not familiar with, and everyone advised me not to do it, so I insisted on doing it. And we crossed a causeway, which is it's a bridge with a tunnel underneath, and the car almost got washed away. It sort of did. And we took it across and we unpacked it, dried it out, and then we pushed it back across, and it almost got taken away in the flood. There was a flood on the other side. And then I said, let's jump into the water to just wash it off, the stress of what had happened. And he naturally swam upstream because it's instinctive, because he grew up in swimming in floods. I swam towards the current that was underneath, and it just went and it just grabbed me. I was gone. But the tunnel that I went in, one leg went in and one went on the other side, so it trapped me. For some reason, my husband turned around, he saw the hair on top of the water, and I was under and I was trapped, and he dragged me up out of it.
Miguel, your Meredith's husband, what did you think when you saw her head underwater?
I was about to swim off. I was about to swim further upstream, and then she went unusually quiet, and I thought, what's happened? And I turned around, she just wasn't there. She'd disappeared. And so straight away I just knew that what had happened. I went, of course, there's these tunnels that are about probably that wide that let the water under the bridge. There's a whole series of them. And Meredith had just got too close to one and it sucked her right under you, because there's no way that you could have seen it. And I saw her hair floating on the water, and I thought, and in an instant I just thought, that's where she is, and somehow she's not gone all the way through, and so I just pulled her out.
Kate, 13 years ago, you had a near-death experience while you were walking home from work. Can you tell us about that?
I was on my way home at 8 o'clock at night, and I was about to cross a pedestrian crossing, and there was a car reverse parking to my right, and I even waited for them to turn their engine off. And then I stepped onto the pedestrian crossing and a taxi came and completely wiped me out. So I was hit through my right side of my body first and then thrown onto the bonnet. I remember it as if it was happening to me and I was watching it happen to me. So I was on the bonnet screaming for him to stop. Stop, stop, please stop. And I was narrating that experience. So I was going, oh wow, I'm being really lovely, I'm saying please. And I was really calm. The experience was really calm for me. I didn't know that I was screaming. I wasn't hearing screaming, but I was like, oh no, I'm pleading. I'm saying please, please stop.
So it was like you were witnessing your own accident at the same time that it was actually happening.
It was as if my you know, my soul or the part of me, my consciousness, what makes me me, left my body to allow the body to have that experience. I didn't feel any pain. It's a feeling for me of knowing that I'm not my mind and I'm not my body, but the part that makes me me was external to my body at that time.
Cerise, you were suffering severe stomach pains while you were pregnant with your second child and you were rushed to hospital.
Yes.
What were you told when you got there?
I still can remember the midwife that was with me then decided to call the doctor in the theatre, and then the doctor from the theatre straight away told her that we have to go to the theatre right now.
So you had to have an emergency cesarean
Cesarean and all of that, yeah.
Do you remember anything about that time in the operating theatre?
Yes, I can still remember when we going to the theatre, went to the elevator, and then I still managed to call Don, my husband. I told him that I'm gonna give birth now, and then they put the anesthesia already on my mouth. So I remember seeing my dad and my grandfather in my dream, telling me like, how are you? Are you okay? And all of this. And then they were trying to, I think we're going in a place, like in a paradise or something like that, in a good place. And it's just the three of us.
So in your head, you're seeing your dad, you and your granddad.
Yeah.
Were they alive?
No.
They were dead?
Yeah.
Eleanor, you were 15 years old when you recall stumbling across a cave that you'd never seen before. What did you do?
I went into the cave and I curled up and I went to sleep, and I had a dream about my mother and I going shopping. A very ordinary dream of a 15-year-old, I think. Just
After that shopping trip with your mum, what happened?
I suddenly came to, and there were all these people surrounding me. I was on the road. There was all these people surrounding me. Ambulance had arrived. They were there at this point, and I was in excruciating pain. But the time when I was in the sleep state with going shopping with my mum, I was in no pain whatsoever.
At the point you woke up in that pain, did you understand what was going on?
I realised that we'd had a car accident. The car had hit a tree. I recall the impact, and then after that, there's different realities.
So the cave, your mum, the shopping trip, none of that was real?
It was to me.
Yeah.
It was very real to me. I had a voice after the impact. A voice in my head said to me, "Go and find the cave in the side of the road." And so I went wandering. This was in a national park. I went wandering down the road, what seemed like for hours, and it was peaceful and blissful. Then I found the cave.
So when you realised later that you'd been in this accident, do you have any memories of the car crash?
Only of the impact. And then when I came to and was in pain.
What were your injuries when you found out later what had happened?
The seatbelt broke my ribs, and then my ribs pierced my stomach, my liver and my spleen. So I had a huge amount of internal hemorrhaging.
Did you tell anyone about the dream that you had?
I told my mum, and my mum tried to give me some kind of supernatural explanation for it. Even at 15, I thought, no, it's a bit woo-woo. I don't need to, yeah.
What did you make of it?
I don't know. It's an experience. I don't have the language to explain what happened. I just know it happened, and that was my reality, and that's what I lived during that time.
Cerise, you also saw loved ones during your near-death experience.
Yeah.
What were you told about your time in hospital?
I was told that I almost died. It was really, really a painful experience. I was in an induced coma for 4 days.
Don, you're Cerise's husband. What did the doctors say to you during this time?
I clearly remember what the surgeon told me. if you actually believe in a big fella somewhere out there, you must be somebody special. Your family is.
Wow.
Because 5 to 10 minutes, you could have lost both your wife and your child.
Cerise, I can see this is sort of upsetting to recall. Are you okay?
Yes.
How do you make sense of seeing your dead relatives while you were in this coma?
Maybe they helped me out. They helped me out in that situation. I think they told me, like, your family still needs you. Your girl still needs you. Yeah.
It makes me quite emotional thinking about that. Here's what could be happening to us during a near-death experience.
A near-death experience occurs during situations of intense emotional and physical pain, often when people find themselves on the brink of death. People who've had one report some pretty puzzling encounters: bright lights, out-of-body experiences, and being visited by dead relatives. There's no definitive explanation for why these occur, but science is constantly trying to understand them. One theory is they're hallucinations caused by brain activity as cells begin dying. Other research suggests they may be caused by a lack of oxygen to the brain. Another explanation is that endorphins released during stressful events may produce the peace and calm feelings many report during a near-death experience. However, these theories are hotly debated, and there are many accounts science is yet to understand.
Matt, you're a cognitive neuroscientist. We've just heard what some of our guests saw and felt during their near-death moments. How can we explain these experiences?
There have been some suggestions, I would say, from the neuroscience literature to account for some features which are common in near-death experience. But it's important to stress that these are very preliminary hypotheses, because the fact is we don't have what's called neurological data during the critical moment of a near-death experience. So we don't have recordings of brain activity when someone is having a near-death experience. It's plausible that a massive increase in endorphins as part of a stress response could decrease feelings of pain, could lead to a sense of calm and wellness. But again, we don't have the data to corroborate these hypotheses. They're really just best guesses on what we know about what's likely to happen under a really stressful event.
When we edge closer to death, how does our brain react?
It's a difficult question to answer. One thing which is likely to be, I guess, a shared feature or a common feature is a decrease in oxygen to the brain. Some of the most comprehensive studies of near-death experiences have been performed on people who've had cardiac arrests in hospital. And a common feature of cardiac arrest is a lack of oxygen to the brain. And one consequence of this may be brain damage to parts of the brain which control what you see. And so that might actually correspond to seeing things like tunnels and lights as a response to death in the part of the brain responsible for vision.
Can science make sense of all these experiences?
I don't think it can yet, but I'm optimistic that in the future they can be unpacked.
Do you know whether all of us will have these experiences when we come close to death?
No, I don't. And my understanding is that it's a very low incidence of people who do have a near-death experience. It's also tricky because near-death experiences can happen when you're not clinically close to death, which shows that your expectations might have an effect. So there's a lot we don't know about who is likely to have a near-death experience, and it's just one of those great unknowns for now.
Greg, many of us will know you as the original Yellow Wiggle. In 2020, you were performing and had a heart attack on stage.
Thank you, everybody! Woo! Thanks for coming to support all those wonderful people. Guys, I think we're going to end it there. Greg's not feeling real well. He's, I think he's going to be okay, but Greggy. So thanks everyone for coming tonight, and it's going to be all right. We've got some medical attention.
Greg, what do you recall from that day?
From the day, not a lot. I've come to remember a lot more about it since that happened, but when I got out of hospital, I really didn't remember much about the night or about the day leading up to it. But I came to remember that I'd been to the gym that morning. I worked out, went to Bunnings, had to get some stuff to fix my toilet at home, all the stuff you do on a regular day. And then I remembered going off to the venue. We did a sound check. But yeah, I'd lost all of that. It was all blanked out from my mind until much, much later.
Do you recall the falling to the ground bit, any part of that?
I do now, yes.
Yeah.
And I think it wasn't until I actually watched that footage back for the first time that I remembered a lot of stuff. And it was probably a bit of morbid curiosity, really, because when I woke up in hospital and saw the news reports about what had happened, that bit of footage that you see there where I fall to the ground, when I was watching that on the news, it looked like I was just bending down to pick up my bottle of water, which I was, and I'd done that many times through the show. And I thought, oh, they must have just taken a bit of footage from another part of the show, because surely they didn't catch the moment that I collapsed. But when I watched it back and saw that they did, and then I heard underneath the audio, you could hear my breathing. I was struggling to breathe. And when I heard that, that brought back a lot of memories of the moment that I'd collapsed. So it wasn't part of my memory until it was played out for me.
How big was your heart attack?
Well, it was a massive heart attack. They call it a widowmaker because not many people survive those. So it was massive enough to stop my heart, send me into cardiac arrest. And my heart stopped beating. I remember blacking out, and that would have been it.
Do you remember thinking anything like, this could be it?
No, not at that point in time. A Wiggles show, for anybody who's seen one, is quite energetic and involves a lot of moving around. And over the years, I've done thousands of those shows. There's a few times in previous history where I would be quite exhausted at the end of a show and I'd fall onto the ground, and you probably saw there, the guys just sort of came over and had a look, and they probably thought, oh, there he is again, just exhausted on the ground. We'll wait for him to come to and everything will be fine. But I just remember lying there feeling exhausted, and I do remember blacking out, but not knowing what was happening.
Did you see, hear or feel anything out of the ordinary?
Just before I collapsed, I felt really unwell,
Yes.
but it was momentarily. It was maybe just a moment of panic as I struggled to breathe, but no knowing of what might be. In fact, if anything, it was quite peaceful and calm. Yeah, there was no kind of impending doom. It was just, I feel like I'm going off to sleep.
Daryl, you're a former Queensland police officer. In 2000, you responded to what you thought was a routine call. What did it end up being?
It was 3:50 a.m. in the morning, and by police standards, it was a routine job. Death threats that were delivered 6 hours earlier. So it was an emergent situation. We've driven to the cul-de-sac. We spoke to 2 males. We've moved back to the sergeant's patrol vehicle to start our investigations to see what actions we were going to take. The sergeant's in the driver's seat. He's on a mobile phone doing background checks on the suspect. My partner's entered the front passenger seat. She's using the police radio to do background checks on the 2 males who've called us. I open the rear passenger door of the patrol car, sit down, slide across so I can listen to the information coming in. And I'm thinking, oh, we're only going to be here a few moments, so I'll leave this door open. It's dark, it's still, and it's so quiet, you can hear a pin drop. And all of a sudden, I hear this pat, pat, pat sound coming from the left outside the car door. And what's flashed through my mind is, oh, the only thing that makes sense is that must be some dog that's running up to the patrol car. So I nonchalantly turn, lean and look. We have the interior light on, so I can't see anything. But I'm only there for a second. The next thing I know is that I'm turned over here, my hands around my mouth, they're full of blood, teeth and bone. Standing there had been a man, pointed at my head from less than a metre away was a .22 calibre rifle. Shot me in the face, shot me in the shoulder, then he turned the firearm on my partner and on my sergeant. And I tried to open the door here, the child locks were on. I sat up, the sergeant's seat is empty, his door's wide open. My partner is completely still, she's splattered with blood. I've got audio exclusion, I can't hear anything. I draw my firearm and I go out through the door and I go to confront the gunman. I was full of rage. I thought it was a cheap shot. I wanted to find and confront the gunman, and I've screamed out at the top of my head for him. But I've quickly realised the sergeant's missing. Where is he? You know, do I search for the sergeant or respond to my partner? And I said, well, I know where my partner is, but I don't know where the sergeant is. My thought is he lying somewhere in the street, mortally wounded? So I walked down the street with my firearm, yelling out, Chris, Chris, Chris. And when they actually listened to the audio later on, they asked me what I was saying because they couldn't understand because there'd been so much damage to my mouth. I couldn't find Chris. People had started now to come out, neighbours, and I knew that we had a gunman on the loose with a rifle, and so I gave them the directions. It wasn't my best customer service at that particular time to direct them back in their houses. And then I've walked back down the street and I distinctly remember wondering, what am I going to find? And I hear, Greenie, I'm hurt, Greenie, I'm hurt. And to me, it was music to my ears because I knew my partner was alive.
Did you think you were going to die?
I just had too much fight in me. And I felt no pain when I was shot. I knew I was badly injured because when I've returned to the patrol car, I've seen Charnel's alive, and my adrenaline is starting to wane by this stage, and I'm actually trying to staunch the flow of blood from my mouth. It was that bad. I'm holding it here, and in my right hand I'm holding my firearm, and I'm resting on the bonnet of the patrol vehicle, and I'm looking through the windshield at my partner saying, Char, it'll be all right, it'll be all right, trying to calm her down because in those situations you want to calm down, and so your heart is not pumping as fast, and so you're bleeding less because I didn't know if she was going to make it, and I wasn't in a position to offer first aid, and we had no first aid kit available, and I thought the best thing I could do was to stand guard over her in case the gunman returned.
Carly, you're a psychologist. You treat patients who are recovering from a near-death incident. Is our experience with near-death different when our mortality is threatened by another human as opposed to an accident?
Often it can violate our sense of safety and justice in the world, and it can be really unexpected. So often survivors of interpersonal violence will either have an adjustment or stress-related disorder that they have to kind of manage and get treatment for and deal with, but it can be very difficult to then start to feel safe in the world. Some people might feel very avoidant, and they might engage in agoraphobic behaviours where they feel too unsafe to leave their home, go anywhere in public. And some people might feel a bit anxious, but they're able to do that if they have a supported person or if they gradually work up to being outside. But it can lead to people sometimes feeling depressed. It can really heighten anxiety. It can also lead to significantly impaired interpersonal relationships where friendships, colleagues, family members, they might not know the person anymore, and the person also might not know how to be normal anymore. So all facets of life might be impacted.
And what about the impact on mental health?
It can be pretty significant for people who've been victim survivors of interpersonal violence. There can be a lot of rage, a lot of anger, especially if there might be, protracted or long court cases that require a lot of energy and resources. And a lot of people might feel a sense of injustice. Why me? What did I do wrong to deserve this? Will it ever happen again? There can be a lot of shock, fear and confusion.
Darryl, can you relate to that sense of sort of impact on mental health?
Absolutely. I suffered the full range of symptoms of PTSD, dreams, depression, anger, anxiety, fear of open spaces, sexual dysfunction. And at that particular time, police didn't speak about mental health, and I thought I was going crazy, and I just kept it all inside.
Kate, did your view of the world change after your close call?
I spent a really long time hating the world. The world became this terrifying place to be a part of. I really suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder because that accident played over and over in my mind. So I felt constantly kind of in fight and flight mode, alert and looking for danger. I was barely sleeping 2 hours a night. I was in extraordinary physical and mental pain.
Carly, how do you work through some of these feelings with your patients?
Firstly, we validate what's happened and why it is so difficult to adjust to the world, going back into the world after something like that. Secondly, then we try to engage with any thought errors that they might be having. So, is anyone 100% safe all of the time? Unfortunately not. It's just something that humans tell ourselves in order to feel a sense of control and agency in a world that is very random. And then we also talk about instances where there is interpersonal violence. Are there any steps you could take reasonably that would increase your sense of safety in the world? You know, who are unsafe people in your life? Where are unsafe places, if there are any? But always not trying to flood them and shock them back before they're ready to get back to usual routine, because that can be more harmful than just waiting and allowing their body and nervous system to get back to normal functioning.
Is there any part of us that can grow from these experiences?
There absolutely can be, as long as a person is supported enough in order to have that post-traumatic growth or that growth after an experience like this. And you find it is quite common for people to change jobs, change hobbies, you know, get up and move and change their lives because they recognise that how they were spending their precious time on this earth is not aligned with where they really want it to be.
Kate, was there any growth for you?
So I started with a new head of rehab and he said, I want you to write down your rehab goals. I want you to dream as big as you can. I'm like, I want to be surfing. I want to be wearing high heels. I want to be doing the Bondi to Coogee again. That's sparking that hope inside of you. And the first thing he said to me is like, well, you need to learn how to meditate. Your body's in fight and flight. You're barely sleeping 2 hours a night. We need to get you into parasympathetic mode. And I was this evidence-based, goal-oriented lawyer. And, you know, at one of the end of the spectrum, I had Sydney's top neurosurgeons telling me that I'd be having all of these neurosurgeries to my spine. And at the other end of the spectrum, I had somebody telling me I needed to add in meditation to the mix.
Did you stick with doing law?
So yeah, I'd done 7 years at uni and 7 years in the industry, and then spent a year studying and graduated in India to teach people how to meditate.
Looking back, how do you feel about that brush with death?
I would never wish it upon anybody. I had to get to the depths of myself to rise back up again, but it has truly made me the woman that I am today. I'm so grateful for everything about that experience. I was a very unwell woman that was deeply struggling inside of my career and my personal life, and that accident absolutely changed my life for the better in every way.
Brett, almost 7 years ago, you survived a shark attack. How close were you to dying?
I guess pretty close. When I look back at my experience and can sum up the experience of the attack itself, but then the moment of being close to death, I would sum that up as when I was laying there on the beach, missing 3/4 of my left quad, losing blood rapidly, and there's this moment where we've talked about the calm, we've talked about, you know, having those out-of-body experiences, but for me it was just a simple question of, is this what it feels like to die? And I know that is, like, that's the cliche of all cliches, right? You get to this moment and there's a question that you ask. And I think you expect there to be this really profound answer that you get back as far as, well, whether this feels like death or not doesn't matter because this is what my life means and everything. But for me, there was just a simple answer, it was no. And I'm not saying it was a choice, but the overwhelming response for me that I could feel and follow was no, it wasn't my time.
Like Kate, you see what you went through as positive overall. Why?
I've been through an experience that not many people experience. Not many people survive and be able to talk about it. And I think there's a part of what that has meant for me as far as the intrigue in the story and what people get from it. And I've always looked at what I've been through as unlucky as it is. And as bad a situation as you can be in, I always think of the things that have been positive to come out of it. And I have this story that, yeah, it is something that grabs people because everyone knows about Jaws and everyone knows about all the shark stories, and it's always the point of intrigue. But what I really focus on is the fact that it's not about what happens to you, but how you respond is what really matters. The person that I was beforehand is someone I'm proud of because I was doing something that I loved, but I could never change someone's life through sharing a message that I can today.
The person beforehand, how were they different to the one today?
The person I was beforehand was someone that was very driven to live out a goal that they'd had since they were 11 years old when they first stepped on a surfboard, which was to become a professional surfer. Surfing is an amazing sport, something I have always loved and has always been a huge part of my life, but it is a very selfish sport. And I think being able to take a step back from that drive and having this goal, which was all about me, and being able to offer something back to other people is definitely the biggest difference that I have noticed between the person I was before and the person that I am now. And I think that's something that you don't know at the time of the event. It's not something you wake up in hospital and you're like, yeah, I get to do all these things now. It doesn't work like that. But as you do get the benefit of hindsight and I guess the perspective that you can gain from seeing what these experiences can mean for you and those other people that need to hear them, I think that's where you can start to give back, and that for me is where a bit of a greater purpose was, other than trying to do or chase this one goal that initially was just for me.
Jack, you almost died after a scuba diving accident. How did that experience change your life?
I have this really clear moment of stepping outside of a hyperbaric chamber after about 24 hours of not knowing, in and out of consciousness, not knowing if I was about to die, and remembering my foot hitting the floor, barefoot hitting the horrible tacky green Queensland Health linoleum and going, I'm never going to waste this life. This is it. I'm not going to waste my life at all. But it definitely changed my direction. I came out as queer. A whole lot of things that have been real blessings since. And I wouldn't say that it's still easy.
What do you think your life would have been like if you hadn't almost died?
I think I probably would have stayed trapped in a cycle of what was actually more traumatic than my trauma, which is this cycle of staying in patterns that everybody else around me had, and would never have pursued really getting to know my true authentic self, and never have gone on to study. I think I would have stayed trapped listening to everyone else saying, you know, you're not that smart. And I think I would have just continued on for maybe a lot longer. A part of me does think with my personality that I still would have made changes. I think it probably sped things up. Yeah.
Miguel, you saved your wife from drowning. How has her near-death experience affected your relationship?
There wasn't anything immediate, but when I would recall, even when I recall it now, I feel like it was one of those moments where it was, I didn't follow my gut instinct, so I feel quite guilty about not having just taken a stand and not being in that place at that time, and so I feel guilty about that and affected by that most. But I think it brought us closer together. I think probably it happened on Valentine's Day, and it was very close. It was a very close call.
Get stuck into you about as well. It's the only thing I don't go near.
Meredith, how do you feel hearing that?
We live in a fairly open family. Like, we say what we think in our household, but I leave that alone, what he went through. It's one of the things, and I'll talk about lots of other things that I've been through, and I like to blame him for everything. But I've never really got stuck into Miguel about this, because I think it's very deep-seated and deep-rooted that he blames himself for even me getting in the water, because he knows that he knew the water and I didn't. And I think it's haunted, I believe it's haunted him. Well, I know it has. Otherwise I would bring it up and use it against him when we have an argument. Or so I have, and it has come out more and more as we've got older, that I've thought he really carries this.
You and Miguel have 2 children. What impact has this had on them?
My son would love to be sitting here telling you the impact it's had on him. He'd be quite open about it. I think it's had a huge impact on him. I'm not going to lie. I'll say that my anxiety rises and I can't control it around the water, and they just want to be kids and they just want to swim and be happy, and I panic and I don't really handle it very well. So it's got to the point where I say, don't take me. I'm not coming. I'm not going near the water. Don't take me. I don't want to be around it because I'm just going to ruin it for the kids. So I have projected it onto the kids. I haven't been able to control that.
Greg, you had a cardiac arrest while performing with the Wiggles. Did that affect your relationships?
No, it hasn't affected my relationships. You know, I'm extremely fortunate. Well, I consider myself to be fortunate, not only because I survived, but because I wasn't aware of what was happening at the time. I was blacked out and that was it. I think it was possibly worse for other people who were around me, like the guys in the group, seeing what was going on, my parents who were there that night watching me be resuscitated, but also for my wife who's a cardiac nurse. So she knows full well what the likely outcome of a cardiac arrest could be. Not just the fact that not many people survive, but if you do survive, you're likely to come out with brain injuries. So it hasn't affected my relationships because of the event that took place, but I think we all experienced it in a different way.
Do you and your wife talk about what happened?
Not often, no. For that very reason, that we have very different experiences of what occurred. I blacked out and I woke up in hospital. She went through days of wondering what the outcome was going to be. Like, we knew fairly quickly that I'd survived, but she was not sure. Like, in hospital, I wasn't remembering a lot of things. And she was thinking, well, it's quite likely with 20 minutes of CPR or whatever it was, Greg's going to have a brain injury, and that's not going to be a good outcome, you know? So it's tormenting for people that have to live through that. And I'm blessed not only to survive, but I didn't have those moments of wondering, was I going to live? I didn't feel anything, so I'm incredibly fortunate.
Jennifer, you were a single mother when you met a man who would become your husband. How would you describe him?
My sunshine at the time. I hadn't been in good relationships and had found this guy that was funny and very handsome and athletic. He was kind to my daughter. She just loved him and called him Dad. And I walked down the aisle because I loved him, but I walked down the aisle because of how she loved him and how he loved her.
9 months into your marriage, something happened. What was it?
The ink on the certificate wasn't even dry, and he was critically injured in an accident. So we just laid the slab for a new house, and he was on life support.
Did doctors think he was going to make it?
No, he was airlifted through to the hospital after the accident, and they just said that they're surprised that he survived the helicopter flight to the hospital. They took his wedding ring off and gave it to me and just said to say goodbye.
Your husband had many physical injuries from that near-fatal accident. How did that affect your relationship?
It killed it because I went from being in the honeymoon phase to being his 24-hour nurse. I sat in ICU just begging him not to die. I just wanted to see his eyes open again. And I was so panic-ridden that I was going to lose him that I couldn't leave him at the hospital, so I stayed with him.
What happened to your marriage?
My daughter was just so depressed and angry, and I suffered PTSD, terrible anxiety, and I ended up with chronic fatigue from the exhaustion. I was working 2 jobs after he came home. We completed the house and it just all got too much.
So you ended up divorcing?
We divorced, yeah.
Do you think there's anything that could have helped you and your marriage?
Support. There was just no support for carers, and I didn't have family at all to support me. So I was basically it for her and caring for him.
What would you say to other carers in your situation?
Find someone who'll listen to you, because there's so much focus on the injured person, and there's just endless support with psychiatrists and doctors and physios and all that sort of thing, and you're running in the background keeping everything together. And no one actually wants to hear how you're coping. There's absolutely nobody who wants to listen to you crying at nights and the pain that you're in and the anxiety that you're suffering is horrendous.
This happened 20 years ago. Do you wonder how different your life could have been had it not been for that accident?
Yeah, because I deeply loved a man that I never thought I'd find, and then I had 9 months with him. And he was very different after the accident. It wasn't his choice, but there's still a lot of, as you can see, there's still a lot of emotion and pain from going through that.
Phil, you went into cardiac arrest and collapsed during a basketball match. Your teenage son was there with you on that day. What do you remember?
Nothing really. People have used the term out of body, but it wasn't really out of body. It was like you were standing there looking at me and I was looking at everything happening. One of the first things I remembered is it's like I was asking Josh, what are you doing? And the thing that came out was, I'm calling 000. And we proceeded for a lot of other things with the CPR and the defibrillators coming and the paramedics. But the big thing about it all, in my own mind, I said, I'm not going anywhere.
Right.
And when, in my mind, or when the people said it paramedics, or as I saw it, the paramedics were there, that was time for me to go down and relax, basically sit on the sub bench. And at that point, it was like, it's me, lying over there on the ground, and then everything went black, and I woke up 3 days later in hospital. I've had a heart attack.
What were you told about what had happened to you?
I was told I was critically dead for around 15 minutes.
Wow.
That would have been the interval between dropping and the paramedics getting there. They informed Josh that they'd actually got me back, so that was the time frame.
Josh, you're Phil's son. You saw your dad collapse. What did you think had happened?
I originally thought it was a stroke because he's had a stroke in the past, and when the paramedics told me it was a cardiac arrest, I was surprised.
Did you call the paramedics?
Yeah, I called 000. Yeah, it happened really quickly. They got there really quickly. It probably was 15 minutes. It felt like 2 minutes.
Phil, has that close call changed your outlook on life?
Yes, no. A bit harder in my approaches to life. More stronger on my point of views and believe they're valid, which is no BS on anything and let's get on with it. I think we all worry too much about the little things and we get upset about them, and we should just brush them off and live our lives and live our days. And be a bit thankful when we wake up every morning that we're awake, and be thankful when we finish the day that we can go to bed at night, because there's a lot of people with a lot of family and friends that are not.
Have you made any decisions about what you want to do?
I'm moving in a couple of weeks, up bush a little bit.
Okay.
It's moving on to a new goal, in a new direction.
So moving to regional Victoria, you guys live together at the moment. Will Josh come with you?
No, Josh has got his apprenticeship to finish, and he's a big boy now, and I think it's time he stands on his own 2 feet a little bit.
Josh, how do you...
So there you go, that's my hard attitude.
Josh, how do you feel about that, having to sort of move out, I guess, because your dad's moving away?
It's a new experience. I'll just take it as it goes, really.
Yeah.
Hopefully it works out.
How would you describe your relationship with your dad today?
Probably better than what it was before the incident. Lots of sort of little things have changed, like he sort of stepped back a bit. We run like a club down where we live, and we do taekwondo, and he sort of like stepped back in like the training aspect, and I've sort of started teaching a bit more. Now he's moving as well, so.
Eleanor, you nearly died in a car crash when you were 15. Decades later, your husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Did your near-death experience impact how you dealt with that?
Yes, it certainly did. Ed was diagnosed with terminal cancer and had 8 months later he had a cardiac arrest precipitated by the cancer. We were at home and he fell on the bed. I saw his body in distress and in a lot of pain. I went to see a psychologist to help me with the grieving after he died. I told him the story of my near-death experience, and I needed to know if what I witnessed externally happening to Ed was different to what Ed was experiencing at that moment when he passed. So did his brain protect him? Did it send him somewhere else? Was that possible? And the psychologist said to me, yes, it was possible. I have taken extreme comfort in understanding that he probably was somewhere else without pain, in a blissful state, and maybe didn't even know what he was experiencing. He knew about my near-death experience. One night he turned to me and he asked me about the experience that I had had. And I knew he was contemplating his own mortality. I talked to him about the experience, and I hope that there was some measure of consolation in my experience that he could have taken with him as he processed what he was experiencing.
In a sense, you're able to sort of reassure him in some way.
That his brain would protect him.
Greg, has your brush with death changed how you approach life?
It's certainly changed what I do with my life. I dedicate my time now to raising awareness about sudden cardiac arrest and the need for community members to be able to do CPR and have access to an AED. I've set up a charity called Heart of the Nation, and that's our core mission, is to try and save more lives, because about 26,000 Australians every year have a sudden cardiac arrest. Only 5% get to go home to their families. So I'm 1 in 20, and I don't take that lightly. And I think to be able to hold your loved ones that little bit more tightly and dearly, and let them know that you really do love them and care for them, because no matter how much we want to be able to control our lives, life can turn on a dime and things can change like that and you don't even know it.
How do you feel about death?
It's an interesting question, particularly being in a room full of people with their own experiences. For me, that moment when I blacked out, I guess, is the moment that my heart stopped. And I take comfort in the fact that for me that moment was not terrifying. I was not fearful. I didn't know what was happening. And I think to use the expression, my brain was protecting me, is a very good expression to use. It's something that is inevitable. Death cannot be avoided. And I think now to have been through that moment when it could have been it for me and come out the other side knowing that I was not fearful of that, I'm hoping that it's like that again.
Meredith, what are your thoughts on death?
I'm a little bit confused about death because I've always had a fear of death. But it made me realise, do I know myself that well? Because when you're put in that position, I reacted very differently to death than what I ever would have expected. And I accepted it immediately and went, okay. So it confuses me a lot. But I'm fearful of it, yes, still.
Brett, following your shark attack, have you returned to the water?
I have. It took me 5 months in total to get back in the water after being told that I would never walk or surf again, which is its own unique battle with plenty of ups and downs. I think when it comes to the question of why would you get back in the water after everything that had happened, that's something that I've asked myself as many times as my mum asked me at the time. And for me, there was 2 reasons for getting back in the water. Number one is there is something about being in the ocean and being in the water it's always been home to me. It's always been a place where I've felt comfortable and I've loved being in, and surfing has always been such a large part of my life that I never wanted to give that up. But I think the main driver for me in wanting to get back in the water was to show a lot of other people what was possible. Like for me, one of the biggest things that got me to that point was the support of so many people. I think my way of saying thanks to those people was just to give them, this proof of what's possible when you have the right attitude towards bouncing back from something like that. When you have the right people around you, there are some amazing things that can happen. And I think a lot of humans are really, really remarkable. And to be able to add just one small thing to what we're able to do as humans is something that I can look back on with pride.
Thank you so much, and thank you to you all for being here. Thank you too for your company. You can catch up on this episode or any others on SBS On Demand. I'll see you next time.